Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. More than 100 people showed up at Lethbridge City Hall protesting $10 a day daycare, which they say is hurting childcare centres. Federal Tory leader Pierre Poilievre called Prime Minister Justin Trudeau a climate hypocrite during question period. We will explain why. And our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari has details on corruption in Ukraine, where 5 government officials stole more than $40 million in war funds.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Daycares across Alberta temporarily shut down today to protest the financial strain they've been under thanks to $10 a day daycare. As BCN's newest video journalist Alex McLeod explains now, for some, the dollars simply don't make sense.
More than 10 childcare programs in Lethbridge and many others across the province closed their doors today. The rolling closures are in protest of the $10 per day childcare program. Austin Goldie, who organized the event, says she wants this change to be more feasible for both parents and daycare providers alike.
We feel that it's important to be able to continue to offer quality care for children at an affordable rate at the same time. So we're looking for accessibility and sustainability, and right now we don't have that. So a lot of centres are at risk of closing their daycares over the next month or two due to the lack of funds that the government is able to give us. It's a very scary time right now because some businesses who are, been in business for over 20 years are now having to let go of their staff, let go of their families and close their doors because they're lacking the funds and they're lacking the autonomy to be able to operate and to offer things that they want in their centre that they've always done.
Here in Lethbridge, the streets in front of City Hall are lined with parents as many had to take the day off due to daycare closures. The closures are spanning across the province and many are down here sharing their opinion. Crystal Churcher, chair of the Association of Alberta Childcare Entrepreneurs, drove down from Calgary just for the event.
I had to be here to support our association members. I spent the morning in Calgary talking to members that are closing there and just providing support. How do you not show up to this? This is amazing.
Some parents want to see the programs accessible for all students without the risk of impacting the quality of care.
Child care service might be arts and crafts. It might be field trips. It might be all the things that currently we receive right now as a part of our monthly fee. They might strip that. The model looks like they're looking to strip those services and offer core childcare, and then we would have to pay additional fees to bring those things back in. So, they haven't put a dollar amount, but it could be $10 for arts and crafts, it could be $5 for field trips, it could be $10 for lunch. It takes that $10 per day daycare and makes it potentially $30, $40 for those who can afford it and want the same thing they have now. Or $10 a day without those services, kids in the same centre receiving different quality of care. I mean, it honestly blows my mind that that's even a thought.
Daycares are seeking emergency funding due to waiting over a month for reimbursement. They are looking to speak with Premier Danielle Smith to resolve this issue. For Bridge City News, I'm Alex McLeod.
Well done, Alex. Your first pack with BCN. Nicely done. Alberta's opposition party announced that they'll be replacing their leader in June. The NDP say that June 22nd is the day that Rachel Notley will be replaced. Notley said on January 16th that she would be stepping aside to give the party a fresh face and voice. Party officials say that the leadership race will run from February 5th until June 22nd. Notley will remain at the helm until the new leader is chosen. The race will have a spending limit of $500,000 per contestant, and fees will total $60,000 per candidate. Caucus members David Shepherd, Sarah Hoffman, and Kathleen Ganley are rumored to be running. The Alberta government announced a new community grant program they say will increase access to justice for Albertans. Justice Minister Mickey Amory says the $1.2 million one-time grant will give Albertans more options for resolving criminal, family, and civil justice matters outside of the regular courtroom.
We will be providing funds for community-based organizations to increase their capacity, create new tools and processes, and conduct training and research they need to make community justice an even more attractive and accessible option to Albertans. I believe that Albertans deserve a fair and accessible justice system. and community justice programs have proven to be an innovative and very popular alternative to the formal court system, which some Albertans can find impersonal and intimidating. The Alberta Community Justice Grant is more than just financial support. It is an investment in the capacity and effectiveness of community-based organizations.
Government officials say interested parties can apply for a one-time grant of between $5,000 and $25,000. Applications will be accepted until February the 29th. An Alberta man was sentenced to 10 months in jail for driving his truck at an RCMP officer during the Coots border protest back in 2022. James Sowery of Flagstaff County, Alberta, was sentenced in Lethbridge late Monday after being found guilty of assault with a weapon and dangerous operation of a vehicle. Now, during his trial, the court heard that Sowery drove his hydrovac truck toward police near a checkpoint on Highway 4 near Milk River on February 14th, 2 years ago. The officer said the vehicle was traveling between 60 to 80 kilometers an hour and he had to jump out of the way to avoid being hit. Sowery maintained his innocence and said all he did was hit a pylon. Now, his supporters were not pleased with the judge's decision.
James was bringing humanitarian aid. He was delivering firewood. That's why they made an example of him.
You know what? We can expect this in a Liberal appointed judge system. We don't have a judicial system anymore. So I didn't expect quite this harsh. You know, listening to all the cases he brought up to attention, I thought, okay, maybe 6 months and some house arrest. But yeah, they threw the book at him.
You know, many of us remember the Freedom Convoy, an incredible time in Canadian history when thousands of truckers made their way to our nation's capital protesting the COVID-19 restrictions and mandates. Well, another convoy is forming, but this one is in Texas. American correspondent Lisa Daftari explains what this group, which calls itself God's Army, is all about.
There's a convoy that is traveling in order to bring attention to border security, and they are trying to, quote, get the border back and try to protect the border in ways that they believe that our federal government is not doing and will not do. And it is absolutely too late. And I mean, the numbers last month broke records, and we have really every month in 2023 was a record-breaking month. And as a whole, the year was a record-breaking year in terms of the sheer number of migrants coming over.
Lisa Daftari will also discuss how 5 government officials in Ukraine were busted for stealing $40 million in funding that was supposed to support war efforts against Russia. She'll have details coming up later in our broadcast. Well, it was another gorgeous day across much of southwestern Alberta today. Jeanette Rocheza now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, how much longer will we be enjoying these spring-like conditions?
Well, basically for the rest of the work week, Hal. Once we do get into the weekend, we are looking at more seasonal temperatures as well as some snow. I hate to break it to you, but for now, we're not going to think about that. We're going to concentrate on these lovely double digits that we're still experiencing and the clear skies as well. So we're looking at sunshine tomorrow. Not going to hit that record breaker that we were expecting on Wednesday. In order to do that, we would have to get at least 14 degrees. That has changed now to a high of 12 degrees. I'll still take it, definitely, for this time of year especially. Now, I'll be back later in the show to give you the full 7-day forecast as well as a look across the country.
Great, thanks so much, Jeanette. Canada is not ready to expand eligibility for medical assistance in dying to people with mental health as their sole condition. Now, that's according to our country's health minister, Mark Holland. He says his government agrees with a joint parliamentary committee report released this week that reached the same conclusion.
Look, we're talking about there are people who have, for decades, been trapped in mental torture, being in a horrific situation where they have tried everything and exhausted all avenues, and under their own recognizance are saying that they want access to MAID. What we're saying is that in order for somebody in that intractable situation who's in a mental health nightmare, that, you know, after trying absolutely everything, that eventually they should have that right. But the system needs to be ready, and we need to get it right. And it's clear from the conversations we have that the system is at this time not ready and therefore need more time.
The executive director of Euthanasia Prevention Coalition applauds the federal government's decision to delay the expansion of MAID. Alex Schattenberg says not including mental illness and medical assistance in dying is a good start, but simply pausing it is not enough.
We as Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, we are of the belief that, in fact, we should actually not just pause this, but we should simply stop it. It should not, they should reverse their decision and not allow euthanasia for mental illness at all.
Schattenberg says the issue of consent for MAID becomes questionable when those dealing with mental illness are included.
The problem with MAID in general is that it gives the doctors the right in law to cause death, but it's based on this concept that you have to be capable of consenting. When you're talking about people with mental illness, the whole issue of consent becomes very questionable at best. So obviously speaking, our country should not be going this direction at all. In fact, we should be reversing our laws on MAID.
Health Canada says in 2022, 13,241 Canadians chose medical assistance in dying. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre came out swinging during question period when he called out Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on his recent trip to Jamaica. Poilievre called the PM a climate hypocrite.
He says that greenhouse gas emissions are driving up grocery prices. He put 100 tons of those emissions in the atmosphere for his personal vacation. This is high tax, high flying, high carbon hypocrisy. Yep. Meanwhile, Canadians in Edmonton were facing minus 50-degree temperatures on which they were paying carbon taxes just to heat their homes and stay alive. Given that he gives himself a free vacation at other people's expense, will he at least allow Canadians to heat their homes without his tax?
The Conservative leader likes to talk about the challenges Canadians are facing on the cost of living, but he refuses to take action in support of them. He chose to delay the passage of Bill C-59, which is also hurting his own caucus.
That's right.
Does the member for Battleford's Lloydminster now suddenly oppose maternity leave for adoptive parents? Surely the member for Cumberland Colchester won't back down on his advocacy to remove the GST on therapy and counseling services. While the Conservative leader is muzzling his own caucus and putting himself first, we'll keep putting Canadians.
This one is just too easy. He walked into it. He had to muzzle a member from Newfoundland who called for an end to his leadership, joining another senator who did the same, because they understand that their constituents are literally starving and unable to heat their homes because the Prime Minister is quadrupling the carbon tax, doubling housing costs, and giving the worst inflation in 40 years. Why won't he listen to, instead of intimidating, his member for Newfoundland and put his leadership up to a review for...
The coroner's inquest into the Saskatchewan mass stabbing is hearing final evidence. Lawyers and advocates say the jury has a lot to consider to come up with recommendations to ensure that a tragedy like what happened on September 4th of 2022 never happens again. Miles Sanderson killed 11 people and injured 17 others on the James Smith Cree Nation and in the nearby village of Weldon, northeast of Saskatoon.
It's been a lot. I would say there's been a lot of evidence on so many different intersecting, layered issues, some of which I think it's probably fair to say this process could only really scratch the surface on. We've heard about a lot of systemic issues, related to, intergenerational effects of residential school, systemic issues regarding, underfunding of all sorts of things, interface of corrections and the parole board and Indigenous communities, and just so many issues that each could be their own weeks-long process.
Overseas, 5 Ukrainian officials were arrested after an investigation revealed that $40 million worth of war funds were stolen. Officials say the funding was supposed to be used to purchase 100,000 mortar shells for the war against Russia. Government officials confirmed the massive procurement fraud as Kyiv seeks to assure international backers that it is cracking down on corruption. Though it was state money and not foreign aid that was embezzled, the scheme is likely to shake up Washington, Ottawa, and Brussels, where EU membership and continued financial and military assistance hang in the balance. Critics of the war point to Ukraine's history with corruption as a reason to stop providing money to the nation nearly 2 years into its war with Russia. Ukrainian officials say they are being vigilant and have been cracking down hard on the country's corruption. Israeli forces disguised as civilian women and medical workers stormed a hospital in the occupied West Bank on Tuesday and killed 3 Palestinian terrorists. The Israeli military says militants were using the hospital as a hideout, but did not provide any evidence.
عملية الدخول الهمجي داخل القسم والاعتداء على الممرضة الموجودة في القسم، يعني هذا أيضا مثبت لدينا ومسجل بالفيديوهات، ولدينا أيضا السجل الطبي للشهيد الذي أحد الشهداء الذين تم اغتيالهم اليوم، وهو منوم في المستشفى منذ فترة ويعالج في هذا القسم، وهو منوم داخل المستشفى ومثبت لدينا ليس كما ادعى الاحتلال.
Israeli Defense Forces say close to 200 of their soldiers have died so far in the war with Hamas, which is taking place in Gaza. Officials say the terrorist group is still holding around 108 hostages in the region. Moshe Lavi is a former captain with the Israeli military, and he says his own brother-in-law is being held hostage by Hamas. He spoke on TBN's Centerpoint program about what his family has gone through since the October 7th attacks in southern Israel.
At one point that day, we lost contact with my sister Lishai and Omri, my brother-in-law. And for about 10 hours, we did not know what has happened to them. And we found out that evening that Omri was taken hostage by Hamas, and that luckily my sister Lishai and two baby nieces, Roni and Alma, were rescued by the IDF in the evening of October 7. And it was a great shock, of course, for all of us. We were starting to grapple with the realities of what has happened everywhere in southern Israel that day. But we were grateful my sister and two nieces survived.
Praying they can all make it home safely. Wow. Well, it was another incredible day here in Lethbridge weather-wise, and that warming trend should continue for the rest of the week. Complete weather details are coming up. It was so nice being in double-digit plus temperatures again today across much of southwestern Alberta. You know who's been really enjoying the weather the most? My puppy dog, Dexter, who now goes for more walks after dinner. Jeanette Rocher is now with a full look at the weather picture. Jeanette, Dexter, and other puppies should be happy for at least a few more days?
Well, the dog walking forecast should be pretty good until at least Saturday. That's when our puppies can expect to get some wet paws. But until then, we are looking at mainly clear skies, lots of sunshine. These double digits as well, looking at 12 tomorrow on Wednesday, a pair of 11s there for Thursday and Friday. Now, Friday, we could start to see a bit of shower activity happening. We're looking at 40% chance. And then later on overnight, those showers giving way to flurries. So then we're looking at all out possibility of snow on Saturday, and then we're going to start to get into those minuses as well as we get into the weekend there. So 30% chance of flurries on Sunday, looking at flurries as well on Monday, back to the minuses there. So the average high for this time of year, -1. Average low is -13. 15 was our high temperature back in 1962. And in 69, we were sitting at -39. 8:07, that's when the sun rose this morning. Sunset this evening at 5:23 p.m. We're looking at 9 hours, 16 minutes of daylight, 2 minutes longer than yesterday. Okay, so it's a bit of a rainy one on the west coast tomorrow, looking at a high of 13 degrees though in Victoria. Also seeing some winds, looking at 30 to 50 winds in Victoria, but in the Juan de Fuca Strait, we're going to look at more 60 to 80 winds, so very windy there. 14 for a high in Vancouver as well, looking at a chance of showers there as well. Mainly clear skies though, right across the prairies. We're looking at high of 6 in Edmonton, 8 degrees in Calgary, mainly sunny skies for both of those cities. And then as we get to the rest of the prairies, also we're seeing mainly sunny skies, lots of clear conditions as well. High of 1 degree in Saskatoon, 7 in Regina, and high of 4 in Winnipeg. And that sunshine's just going to continue right on over into the central part of the country. So Toronto sitting at 5 degrees with mainly sunny skies. Ottawa is pretty much the only place that we're seeing kind of some flurry activity there. 3 degrees for a high in Ottawa. We're looking at chance of showers in the morning and then giving way to showers and flurries by the afternoon there. Mainly cloudy conditions in Montreal tomorrow, looking at a high of 1 degree. As we get into Atlantic Canada, the Maritimes, looking at a high of -2 in Fredericton. Mix of sun and clouds, sunny skies across Halifax and Charlottetown tomorrow, -3 and -4 respectively, -3 for a high in St. John's tomorrow with a mix of sun and clouds. There you have it. That is your forecast.
Around 7,300 Canadian Toyota owners have been told to stop driving by Toyota Canada. And the reason? A potentially fatal airbag fault. The company issued a recall almost 10 years ago, but some owners have still not had their airbags replaced. Company officials say the recall also affects around 50,000 older U.S. vehicles as well, given that the Takata airbag inflators could blow up, killing or injuring motorists. More than 30 deaths around the world have been connected to the faulty Takata airbag inflators that can explode, releasing metal shrapnel inside of vehicles. Federal Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne says he's spoken with a foreign grocery company about bringing their products to Canada. Champagne says he's trying to introduce new players to our market to increase competition. The minister met with Canadian grocers last fall, demanding that they create a plan to stabilize food prices or face consequences of increased tax measures. Taxes, which will most likely be passed on to the consumer, increasing prices even further. Champagne says he's disappointed that grocers have not been more transparent about their plans, but has not said if Ottawa plans to punish them for it. The International Monetary Fund says growth led by U.S. and a slower pace of inflation has led to its upgraded outlook for the world economy this year. The agency now expects the worldwide economy to grow 3.1% in 2024. That's unchanged from last year, but better than the 2.9% it had predicted for this year and its previous estimate last October. Across the globe, the IMF thinks inflation will ease from 6.8% in 2023 to 5.58% this year and 4.4% in 2025. In the most advanced economies, including Canada, the agency says inflation should drop to 2.6% this year and 2% next year. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 27 points on the day to finish at 21,227. The Dow was up 133 points to 38,467. The S&P 500 was down 2 on the day to 4924, and the Nasdaq was down 118 points to 15,509. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.03 to $77.81 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 3 cents to $2.09 US. Gold was even on the day at $2,037.01 US an ounce, and silver was down 3 cents to $23.17 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.76 per bushel, barley's at $6.31, canola's at $13.50, and corn is at $7.49 per bushel. Live cattle February contract was up 65 cents to $178.03. Feeder cattle March contract was up 270 to $241.33. And lean hogs February contract was up 58 cents to 75.85. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.63 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Alberta's opposition party announced that they will be replacing their leader in June. The NDP say that June 22nd is the day that Rachel Notley will be replaced. Notley said on January 16th that she would be stepping aside to give the party a fresh face and voice. Party officials say that the leadership race will run from February 5th until June 22nd, and Notley will stay on until the new leader is chosen. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will have more on the 5 Ukrainian officials who were arrested recently for stealing $40 million. That was funding that was supposed to fund the war against Russia. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of our local stories, visit our website, bridgecitynews.ca.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Come and take part in this year's Polar Plunge to support Special Olympics Alberta and its over 2,800 Special Olympics athletes. Taking place Saturday, February 3rd at Henderson Lake, participants will bravely jump into freezing cold waters beginning at 11 a.m. For this fundraiser, registration is $50 and participants are encouraged to gather donations from friends, family, businesses, and their community. It's a great way for all to show support for Special Olympics Alberta and its athletes. For details, registration, and to donate, visit soa.crowdchange.ca. Big Brothers Big Sisters in Lethbridge is looking for volunteers to mentor children and youth in their various programs. Volunteers commit to 1 visit per week for 1 year. They have many kids that are looking for a big brother or sister. Make a difference in a child's life and start something big. To apply, visit lethbridge.bigbrothersbigsisters.ca. And for more information, call 403-328-9355. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
5 Ukrainian officials have been charged with stealing $40 million. Now, the money was supposed to be used to purchase ammunition as Ukraine's war with Russia continues. Now, to talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari from the Foreign Desk, who joins us from Los Angeles. Lisa, that does not instill a lot of confidence in countries such as Canada and the United States, which has been supporting Volodymyr Zelensky in his war with Vladimir Putin.
Oh, and let me tell you, this is just one example of, I am sure, many, many more examples of embezzlement, money going in the wrong hands, even the weapons purchased with the aid that was provided falling into the wrong hands. This is one case when these 5 individuals that are facing up to 12 years in prison took the 40 million that was supposed to buy, I think, 100,000 mortar shells, and instead obviously went to the wrong place. Now, the only reason that we are finding this out is because Ukraine is trying to be more transparent, try to crack down, so to speak, on this kind of fraudulent business, because they want to become part of NATO. So they're trying to say, oh, look at us. We are doing autocorrect, and we are looking at our own, and we are finding those who are taking advantage of that aid money that all you wonderful people in the West are giving us. So look, the war continues. It's awful. I know many people are very much proponents of giving Ukraine as much aid as possible to ward off the Russian threat. But, how many years into this do we have to go to realize that there is really no solution in sight? There's no off-ramp for Putin. It looks like this is his call, his shots, his decision to make as to when he wants this to end. So we're hoping for, some better resolution soon, some sort of compromise soon. And of course, in the meantime, I'm sure we will uncover many more cases like this one.
And no call for peace talks as of yet between Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky?
No, but it looks like Zelensky's turning a corner, only because it seems like the aid has slowed down. Obviously, here in the United States, there is much more pushback with regards to different legislative bodies not wanting that aid to go to Ukraine, or at least, having some sort of conditions, or they're basically combining it with other things. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago with Biden wanting to push that aid bill through and then buddying it up with a border compromise. Again, horrific, because both are very important and both are very different and should be dealt with differently. But as you know, this is politics, right? They buddy up things that the left wants, the right wants, Democrats want, Republicans want, and they try to get things passed that way. In the meantime, there is no actual, nothing on the calendar yet, but it looks like Zelensky, I think, has turned some sort of corner to look at, some more, constructive ways of bringing this to an end.
Lisa, we had the Freedom Convoy here in Canada 2 years ago protesting government mandates, and now there appears to be a very large convoy forming in Texas, and these guys are calling themselves God's Army. What are they fighting for?
So as we know, the state of Texas very, very much has taken border security into its own hands, actually fighting with Biden's administration to continue their own way of keeping the border safe. As we know, Texas is facing the major brunt of this influx, record number of migrants coming over the border. They have put up barbed wire. They have taken other ways of blocking waterways and things like that. And of course, Biden has taken them to court, tried to fight what the state of Texas is doing. Now, there's a convoy that is traveling in order to bring attention to border security, and they are trying to, quote, get the border back and try to protect the border in ways that they believe that our federal government is not doing and will not do. And it is absolutely too late. And I mean, the numbers last month broke records, and we have really every month in 2023 was a record-breaking month. And as a whole, the year was a record-breaking year in terms of the sheer number of migrants coming over. How I'll also bring your attention to the fact that many of these sanctuary cities are buckling. Many of them are remorseful, and some are not admitting it. But when you look at cities like Chicago and New York and elsewhere, they just cannot absorb the sheer numbers. So it brings us back to the idea that theoretically, of course, bringing in all those who are poor and want opportunity and want to come to this promised land is a wonderful idea theoretically, but when it comes to application, this is not something that the United States can continue to absorb in terms of the sheer numbers. So you find them on the street corners, you see them sleeping on the streets, you see, these are not humane conditions. And that is why we have to slow the pace at which these migrants are coming into the country.
There are reports that Iranians enlisted a Hells Angels biker to put a hit on someone in the United States, and there's a Canadian connection or two.
Yes. So an Iranian national basically enlisted 2 Canadians from a biker gang to go and assassinate a dissident, a very high-profile dissident that was living in the state of Maryland here in the United States. Of course, this plot was foiled, and they were actually uncovered. And now we're talking about the story without the release of the name of that dissident, of course, to keep his or her security. But just horrific how much, and this is really the bigger issue here, is not this specific case, but more so how comfortable Iran's regime has become at not only locating these individuals within Canada and the United States, to think that they live among us first and foremost, right? So to think that they're in Canada, in the United States, individuals who are working for Iran's regime to carry out these plots. The fact that they have no fear to carry out these plots on Canadian soil, on American soil, the fact that they have infiltrated, whether it's the universities, whether it's the labs in the case of China, whether it's our government, the Biden administration, I know the Canadians as well have this issue where there are pro-regime Iranians that are informing or advising or consulting our governments as to how to deal with their Iran policy. That absolutely has to change, and we hope to see that change coming soon. I know that this is a big wake-up call for Canada, for the United States, when we see stories like this, to know that there are those among us who, again, will carry out these plots on our soil here in the West, and to carry out Iran's dirty work here. So I think we've pushed for sanctions. We've pushed for both the Canadian government and the U.S. government to not allow the children, for example, or the family members of these Iran officials, the regime officials, to live in Canada or the United States, to go to school in Canada or the United States. But we have yet to really do a deep cleaning of these influences here.
Islamic Republic-backed terrorist groups in both Syria and Iraq vacated their military posts, Lisa. Apparently, they fear U.S. retaliation following the death of 3 American soldiers near the northeastern part of Jordan over the weekend.
Yeah, so we absolutely know that this was an Iran-backed proxy or 2 groups that killed 3 U.S. servicemen. And obviously, President Biden has said we will retaliate on our own time, in our own way. So Iran's regime is first denying that they had any involvement in this attack, and secondly, evacuating. So if you are real men, if you are really macho about this jihadism, stay and fight. Why are you running away, right? This just goes to show the game, this whack-a-mole game that Iran's regime is playing in provoking the West into a war that we were already fighting, frankly. It's just a matter of really not allowing it to escalate. And I know the Biden administration is absolutely has that goal in mind. But look, too little, too late. Deterrence does not start on the battlefield. Deterrence starts at the podium. It starts with foreign policy. It starts with the stance the United States has taken for the last 3 years, which was, we want to deal with you. We will make nice with you. We will remove vital and biting sanctions. We will allow you to sell oil to China. We will allow you to sell weapons to Russia. And that is why we are where we are. And so Iran's regime will continue flexing, whether it's through the Houthis, whether it's through Hezbollah, whether it's through Hamas. And again, the Biden administration finding itself in a situation where it can retaliate or respond to these one-off attacks. But how about the bigger picture? When will this end? And when will Iran's regime get the message?
Federal authorities caught a terrorist at the U.S. southern border and released him back into the country, Lisa. Now, this guy apparently roamed freely for about a year before being arrested in Minnesota recently.
Yes, and this is just one example. A few things to point out here. First, the fact that there are so many individuals coming through the southern border from countries that have no relationship with the southern border. So why are we finding nationals from China and Afghanistan and Syria coming through our southern border? obviously taking advantage of the vulnerability of our southern border and the fact that they can get right in. Secondly, the number of individuals that have been identified on the southern border that have that were on the FBI's most wanted list. And then we talk about those who are not on the most wanted list, but should be, right? And soon enough, perhaps will be. But that is exactly the vulnerability that the southern border, or the risk that the southern border now poses, is that these individuals are taking advantage. The fact that there are so many men between 18 and 40 coming through the southern border, these are not just families that want a better life, but also these men. One can argue they're coming into work, and that is, workforce age, but also it is something to look at in terms of national security. But, I hope that we as a nation, and I know that these migrants do trickle up into Canada, and I know that many of these bad actors do find themselves in Canada as well. So it's something to talk about, obviously, with relation to both Canada and the United States. But I hope that we don't find out the wrong way, or in a way that will cost us much more, how dangerous this southern border is and how vulnerable it is. We know that we have pockets of terrorists. The fact that he found himself in Minnesota, there's obviously pockets in Michigan. There are places where they find themselves. And again, the FBI has to do a much better job. Border control has to do a better job. And of course, the White House, first and foremost, has to do a better job at setting the tone, setting the pace as to where we stand on national security, our border, and migration.
There's been a lot of talk recently about the UN Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, after it was revealed that several members participated in the October 7th attacks in southern Israel, which left more than 1,200 civilians dead. Now, Lisa, not only did Canada give money to the UN agency, but the Biden administration granted huge money as well. Officials say the U.S. was the single biggest donor, having given UNRWA more than $1 billion since 2021, funding which has now since been suspended.
Hal, this is a crazy story, because we knew for many, many years, this is not something new. Yes, of course, what's surfaced more recently is that they were actually involved in October 7th, which is mind-boggling to think that employees of the United Nations that received taxpayer money from Canada, from the United States, took or participated or knew about or looked the other way, whatever it is, with a terrorist attack of that caliber. It's mind-boggling. But we knew for many, many years what UNRWA was doing. At the very, very least, we knew that they were involved in brainwashing. We knew that they knew about weapons being hidden in schools. We knew that they were, they had those textbooks where they're indoctrinating children from a very young age. And there's no pressure by the Democrats in order to give that money, but there were no conditions. Donald Trump came in and said, I'm cutting UNRWA, I'm cutting aid to the Palestinians in this manner because I know it is going to bad places. I know that it's going to bad things. And when Biden came in the first month, he released or came back and said, I'm just reversing this policy, again, with no preconditions. There was no leverage that was used by the United States to say, here's the money, but we're going to require that you do X, Y, and Z. At the very least, don't involve yourselves in terrorism. I mean, mind-boggling. But, at least now we have many countries, including the United States, that have pulled out, that are not funding UNRWA. There's a lot of pressure by individuals like AOC, who has made it her life's mission now to demand that the Biden administration reinstate aid to UNRWA. I mean, think about that. Somebody who is a representative, a political representative in the United States, begging for the administration to give money to terrorists. I mean, we need to all be on the right side, regardless. I mean, I know that the Israel-Palestinian issue has become like a ping pong game. I know a lot of individuals who are, getting their information from TikTok or Instagram find themselves supporting Hamas or thinking that terrorism is okay. We really need to go back to that center core of terrorism's not okay. Let's start with that and then move outward from, finding constructive ways for peace between the two sides. But I think obviously pulling funding from UNRWA is a very symbolic and obviously pragmatic move. And I hope that we can move from there to eradicate this disease. Really, it's horrific.
Speaking of a nasty disease, Lisa, Philippine troops killed 9 suspected Muslim terrorists in the volatile South region, including 2 key suspects in a bomb attack that left 4 Christian worshippers dead.
Yeah, so this is something that we have worked on for a very long time at the Foreign Desk, that war on Christians in the Middle East and around the world, I should say. This trickles because obviously these terrorists find themselves everywhere. We just had another bombing in Turkey as well. And they have just fixation towards rooting out this Judeo-Christian influence wherever they find it. So these extremists exist in the Philippines, they exist all around the world, and of course fixated on churches, fixated on those who worship Christianity. And again, it's like, how will we ever eradicate this? How will we ever get rid of this disease when it is being promoted on these social media platforms, when we find them on the streets of New York or LA or Toronto actually praising Hamas? I mean, I saw a scene out of a protest in Toronto where it wasn't just a pro-Palestinian protest, it was a pro-Hamas protest, and you see the cops bringing them hot coffee, and you wonder, I mean, how did this happen where these young police officers, and I guarantee it's not out of this radicalism, but it's just misinformation. And for some reason, the jihadists have won that narrative war, that propaganda war, and they control the media in terms of that messaging. So, I think we have to bring these stories back into the forefront. I thank you for talking about it, but this war on Christianity, we saw a war on Christmas. We did a segment on that here at the Foreign Desk as well. This fixation throughout the world to cancel Christmas, to cancel God, to cancel the Judeo-Christian God, that is, and this radicalism to take its place.
Wow. She's the host of the Foreign Desk and our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.
Eyesight is something we should never take for granted, certainly a key aspect to life. Eye health may be something most of us never really give a lot of thought to, but it's a key factor in our overall well-being. Joining us today to talk about eye health is Dr. Olivia Vergitz. She is an optometrist with Visual Effects, partners with FYI Doctors, located in downtown Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. Now, I did not know this, but I was informed today that January is Glaucoma Awareness Month. So why don't we start off by asking what glaucoma is and how can we know maybe from symptoms that it might be an issue?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. January is Glaucoma Awareness Month. Glaucoma is an eye condition that causes damage to our optic nerve. And as that progresses, it can result in irreversible vision loss. There's actually different types of glaucoma. The most common one is called primary open angle glaucoma. This one, you might have heard it referred to as the silent thief of sight. And that's because in its early stages, it actually doesn't have any symptoms. What happens is we have a bit of a higher eye pressure, and over time that pressure can actually cause some mechanical stress on our optic nerve that's at the back of the eye. And that's where the damage can set in. Now, there are some other types of glaucoma that do have symptoms. These can be blurry vision, eye pain or eye redness, nausea and headaches, but these types are a little bit more uncommon.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty serious issue. Now, who is typically at risk for glaucoma?
Yeah, so anyone who has a family history of glaucoma, especially a first-line relative such as our parents, there's an increased risk there. As we get older, that risk increases as well. Anyone who's had an injury to the eye, that can increase our risk as well. And having certain cardiovascular conditions, so high or low blood pressure, different heart conditions as well can be risks as well.
Right, wow. So is there something that can be done to prevent glaucoma?
So a lot of those variables, unfortunately, are things that we can't control. One of the main things is having your regular eye exams with your optometrist. That way they can monitor things and pick up on any potential early signs that may then lead to glaucoma in the future.
Well, that's really interesting. And it's great to have the option to have our eyes checked and go to see someone like yourself. So what kind of treatments are available for glaucoma, and do they have a different level of effectiveness?
Yeah, so effectiveness may vary individual to individual. Commonly, people will be started on an eye drop to lower the eye pressure. There are other laser procedures that ophthalmology can perform, and the laser procedure, what it actually does is opens up the drainage system of the eye to then lower the eye pressure that way. This procedure can be a little more temporary, and often it can be needed to be repeated, and it's often used in conjunction with the drops. If those things don't work, there are further surgeries that can be done, such as drainage tubes or flaps that also can drain some of the fluid as well.
Well, that's very interesting. So is this similar to, let's say, maybe something called conjunctivitis?
No, so conjunctivitis is just affecting the tissue, the clear tissue at the front of the eye over top of the white tissue, the sclera. So there's different types of conjunctivitis. It can be a bacterial conjunctivitis, an allergy, or a viral type of conjunctivitis. So that would be a different condition than what we're talking about there.
Well, thanks for explaining that. It's good to get the clarification and to have a little bit better understanding. And I suppose one way to have a better understanding of our eyes is to have that eye exam that you were talking about. So is there an optimal frequency?
Yeah, so a lot of that has to do on our age. The Alberta Association of Optometrists actually recommends we can have our first exam even around 6 to 9 months of age. At least one exam between the ages 2 and 5. And then kids are typically monitored annually. Around the ages 19 to 64, we'll say at least every 2 years. Anyone 65 years and older are actually covered annually by Alberta Healthcare. Of course, this will all differ person to person, and your optometrist may recommend more frequent visits just based on your own personal eye care needs.
Right. Now, you mentioned children just moments ago in that last answer. So I have been reading some headlines stating that children today, they may be in need of glasses more than previous generations and possibly at an earlier age. Have you seen this, and could you tell us why this might be the case?
Yeah, so we definitely are starting to see both of those things. So nearsightedness, or it's also known as myopia, that's when our vision looking at objects close to us are clear and things a bit further away are blurry. What we've been noticing is that now that technology is becoming a much bigger part of our lives, especially even kids as well, whether it's looking at a phone, a tablet, TV screens, rather than playing outdoors, compared to maybe some of the previous generations, we're finding this has a link to increase in developing this nearsightedness. And so trying to limit those activities or breaking up the time we're doing those, that can help slow down either the progression of nearsightedness or from it starting in the first place.
Right. So then, speaking of that, is there things that we can do to help our eyes stay strong and be healthy?
Yeah, absolutely. So that the biggest one that I just mentioned, the screen time for children. Now having outdoor time is good. Of course, when we're outdoors, wearing sunglasses, protecting the eyes from the UV sunlight. That can cause different eye progressions or eye conditions to show up, such as cataracts earlier in life, things like macular degeneration. So that's where sunglasses are very important. Having a healthy diet and lifestyle, so staying active, eating leafy green vegetables, things with lots of vitamins like bell peppers, citrus fruits. Smoking can be a big thing that can cause eye conditions, especially macular degeneration. So trying to avoid cigarette smoking. So those are kind of the main things that we can do on a day-to-day basis to keep our eyes healthy.
So then there's also that inverse of it too, could you give us maybe the top 5 things that cause eyesight to decrease?
Yeah, so I would say definitely those things I listed. So yeah, so sun protection. So if we're not wearing the sunglasses, having regular eye exams, that way we can detect any of these eye conditions early, no smoking, and healthy diet.
So you had mentioned macular degeneration.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of frightening. Can you give us a description of what that is?
Yeah, so the macula of our eye is at the back of the eye. It's the central area of our retina. And over time, we can notice some damage to that area of the eye. And that things that can cause that are the family history, UV sunlight, smoking, not getting enough antioxidants to protect that part of the eye. And so the trouble with that condition is it's affecting that central vision. So what the vision rely on the most to see details and that type of thing. So it can, and as it progresses, become definitely a visually devastating condition. So that's definitely one we want to try to catch early and monitor.
Yeah, really sounds very important to have maintenance, not just for other parts of the body, but your eyes. They're just such a critical component of our well-being. So it's really interesting to chat about these things with you because we may not always think about that. And one of the things, of course, I don't wear glasses or contact lenses, so I don't really think in terms of do you have any advice for those who wear contact lenses and maybe related infections? But what's your advice there?
Yeah, so the biggest advice I could probably give there is to follow the recommendations and guidelines that your prescribing optometrist has provided you. So not following these guidelines can lead to increased risk of infection, not getting enough oxygen to the surface of the eye, and that can lead to new blood vessel growth. And both of those things can lead to permanent vision loss as they progress. So those common guidelines are going to be not sleeping in your contact lenses, having proper hygiene and cleaning the lenses, and then also not extending the length that you're using your contacts for. So if it's a daily lens, not wearing it more than that one day, and then monthly lenses, once that 30 days of using that lenses is up, making sure we're switching to a new fresh lens.
Wow, those sound like really important things to keep in mind. I wanted to ask you about dry eyes. And I don't know if that's a regional thing, but it's something that I hear a lot about here in southern Alberta. What do you have to tell us about dry eyes?
Yeah, so definitely where we live, we'll see a higher amount of dry eye just because of our environment. It's very dry climate, very windy. So those types of things will definitely play a factor into it. Again, there's lots of things we can do for dry eye. That's been something that there's been tons of research going into. So of course, there's the things we can do at home, such as eye drops and warm compresses, omega-3 supplements. But we actually have a lot of in-office treatments nowadays that our optometrists can perform if those things aren't helping our symptoms enough. So we're lucky to see that progression and that development with the research to have more things available to treat it.
Right. And so you mentioned the word research, which brings me to my next question about new developments with contact lenses that has come from some different research. Now, apparently this new development for contact lenses can actually help stop the progression of nearsightedness in children. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's definitely correct. We have lots of options nowadays for what we call myopia control or controlling that nearsightedness progression. So the contact lens specifically, so how they differ between just the normal contact we think about is they include some treatment zones within the lens, and that's been shown to slow that progression and that lengthening of our eyeball as long as we're wearing the contacts for the recommended period of time.
Well, that's interesting. Now, this one, it still has to do with eyes, a little off topic, but I've some of my friends that work in the trades, you know, they have the choice of safety squints or safety glasses. Can you talk a little bit about even people with hobbies or working in the shop about how to protect our eyes with safety glasses and other things like that?
Yeah, so safety glasses are really important, especially when we're dealing with work environments like that. We often see people coming in that deal with metal work, and they're getting little foreign bodies, metal in the eyes, and depending where that metal lands, it can leave scars and that type of thing. So the more that we can protect that things from getting into our eyes like that, the healthier they will be. Protecting them from trauma as well, if we're in a workplace where those incidents can happen as well.
Yeah, the safety glasses are always better than safety squints, that's for sure. So I wanted to ask you about cataracts. And I'm sure that technology has come a long way over the last 30 or 40 years. But I wanted to ask you, can you tell us the cause and maybe the age that cataracts tend to start at?
Yeah, so cataracts happen when the lens inside our eye starts to become clouded. Most commonly, this occurs with age. So that'd be the most common cause of the cataracts. UV sunlight is something that can cause cataracts to increase. Having certain systemic conditions, so things like diabetes can cause those to develop. There are some medications that can cause cataracts to develop earlier. And there actually are some congenital cataracts. That's not as common, but some kids are actually born with the cataracts.
Wow. And so do sunglasses, like actually good, like polarized lenses, do those actually help from maybe preventing the formulation of cataracts?
Yeah, so anytime we can keep those sunglasses on that have that 100% UV protection, it's going to filter that light out before it gets to the lens in our eye. And then by doing that, yeah, it can slow down that development or progression of cataracts.
Interesting. I've never thought of that being a benefit of some good polarized lenses in sunglasses. Now, a lot of people go for cataract surgery. How much of a process is this? And is there a large success rate to these surgeries?
Yeah, so nowadays, cataract surgery is very successful surgery to have done. It is a day surgery, so typically one eye is done at a time, and it usually only lasts about 10 to 15 minutes per eye. And so, yeah, absolutely, that success rate is much higher now. There's different technologies. Our surgeons are very successful and good at what they do. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Now, the one thing we haven't talked about is laser eye surgery. That's become quite popular. What can you tell us about that? Maybe how long it lasts? Is it a forever cure?
So the kind of length of it lasting that can vary person to person. We're finding a lot more success nowadays with laser eye surgery, and a lot of that has to do with the preoperative assessments they put each individual through. That way they can first determine if you're a good candidate for it, which has shown the success rates to increase. So typically when someone has laser eye surgery, it's correcting for their distance vision. So there's a very high percentage of people getting to 20/20 vision once having that surgery done. What they might notice later in life, or typically will notice, is what we call presbyopia. And that's where everyone starts to lose the natural focusing ability of our eye. And so at some point, they may need reading glasses once that starts to set in.
Gotcha. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Dr. Vergets, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for asking me to be here.
Dr. Olivia Vergets is an optometrist with visual effects, partners with FYI Doctors here in Lethbridge. I'm Michael Clausen, and on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks very much for watching.